Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to speak to you today. Thanks a lot for taking the time. Maybe you just begin with a brief introduction to Extrasensory, this new podcast. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect going in?
This is Lauren's family's story, and it's the story that starts in 1950s Northern England, and there's this terrible tragedy. 3 children walking on their way to church get run down by a car and they all die. Now, 2 of those children are Lauren's aunties, and they're just small children at the time. And it's a horrible headline-grabbing news story. It's late 50s, Northern England. But what happens after that is completely extraordinary, because the father of these children, who is Lauren's grandfather, makes a prediction that these children will be born again and they will be reincarnated. And the story follows what happens from that point. And he goes on attempting to convince the world that they were reborn. And lots of things happen that support that they were. So as the story unfolds and there's loads of twists and turns, we're left wondering what we actually think happened here. And Lauren, when we called her to talk to her about what happened with her family, didn't actually know that much because it was kind of a family secret. Is that right, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I'd obviously heard little bits and bobs from my dad when I was younger, but he has unfortunately passed away now. And I think, as is the case with probably the majority of his family, it was a sort of taboo subject and nobody ever spoke about it. I think, obviously, like we were saying, it's a tragedy, and they lost two young girls in their family. So I think it was a case of, let's never speak about this again. It's that kind of classic 1950s way of dealing with grief of like, we'll never speak to your sisters again. This is what's happened. We move on. So I never really knew much about the accident. And I certainly didn't know much about what had happened, after that with the birth of the 2 new twins that came, and my grandfather's beliefs as well. I had no idea of the kind of level that he had gone to kind of change people's mindsets, and was really fighting for it. So it's all been quite a revelation, really, which is really exciting.
I think that's the thing that struck me as this, as the podcast being so unique, is the fact that you're actually going on the journey almost, the audience are coming along with you and discovering all these things for the first time. So when did the project, first come into being, and did you have any kind of trepidation or hesitation of kind of going on that journey and uncovering these secrets, it being your own family?
Yeah, I think I was actually with my sister at the time when Poppy called me out of the blue. I think knowing that somebody had been to she went to the graves of the 2 girls that had passed away. And she also then saw my dad's grave and also my little sister's grave. And I think just knowing that somebody had been that close to like my family meant a lot. And I think, I was willing to talk to her because I was like, this is, clearly, they're going to such levels. And it is, I've always thought it's a fascinating story, and I've always wanted to know more. And, I'm sad that I don't have those people around anymore to ask those questions. I was nervous about what my other family members might think, because like I said, we had never spoken about it, but I think that was probably just the case of, like I said, at that age, no one was really willing to open up, and everyone thought it was nonsense, his beliefs. I've always been quite spiritual, so I've always been open to the idea that it's a possibility, and, given the chance to explore it and work with, a team of people that were looking into it, I was like, I'm definitely really interested to kind of hear some more and learn more as well, which was amazing because, I've had basically people researching my family when I never had the opportunity to do so. So it's been good.
And we've spent years researching your family.
Yes.
And from your perspective, Rosie, when did you first discover the story, and what really struck you as you thinking this is going to work really well as kind of a research project, but also to be able to turn it into a podcast? Because I guess before you'd really launched into it, you didn't know what you were going to find and what material would be there. So it was really kind of a plunge into the unknown.
I found the story. I came across the story because I've always been fascinated by reincarnation. I'm fascinated by people who have these kind of left field beliefs, in my view, left field beliefs, and really commit to them and take action because of them. And when I saw this story, when I started reading about it, there's quite a lot on the internet about it. I saw the image of the spooky twins and I thought, this is the kind of, there's a sort of origin story here to something that's become this big myth, this sort of cultural myth, like post Shining and everything. I was looking into the story for a while and doing the sort of original early journalism, and then found out that this American professor in the 1960s decided that he wanted to try and find evidence that reincarnation was real. And that this story that I'd been looking at became kind of a central pillar in his research, and then discovered that he'd spent decades studying this family. And suddenly, you know, as a journalist, you're like, wow, when someone has studied it, there's going to be tons of evidence about what he found, like testimony from the time. And for a story that was so sort of otherworldly and like, where it's so difficult to grasp the truth because it's a story about belief, to have that kind of laid out in the form of his work, and no matter what you think about his work, which, you know, we kind of leave open for the audience to decide, it was a gift. You know, I was like, well, this is an absolutely perfect series, because we can go on this journey of learning what he was learning at the time contemporaneously, but also speak to and record, you have the testimony of the surviving family to piece together what is myth and what is true in this story, which could be, and is for some, the story that's the closest thing to evidence that reincarnation is real. And that is here on our doorstep in the UK and is largely forgotten.
And I guess going on this journey together, without, I guess, spoiling any of the twists and turns that audiences can listen to in the podcast, what were some of the standout moments where you really came across something that completely shocked you, maybe a moment that was particularly challenging? And on the flip side, what was your favorite moment in making the podcast?
I mean, for me, I think, it's a kind of sad moment in the podcast, but I had no idea about the woman that had murdered the children. So kind of learning a little bit about her and what she was going through. But I think the main thing really was the level of research that had gone into it, and the kind of what Stevenson had really like enforced with his work, and that he was really the forefounder of everything at that period in time when he was, you know, not listened to like he would have been now. He was pushing things in a way, and my grandfather was involved in that, and I had no idea. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'd never met my grandparents, so to paint a picture of what kind of character he was really nice. And he was obviously, yeah, incredibly powerful and really avid in his opinions and thoughts. And he was, you know, thinking outside the box when other people maybe weren't. So I think to learn all of that was amazing for me.
Did you know that he was so publicly well known at the time and the story was so big? Because that's one of the things that surprised me, was like that it was so famous then.
No, I had no idea. I mean, I imagined that in the town of Hexham that the death of the children would have been written about, but I thought it was just something within the family. Like I thought, as in the reincarnation, I thought that was just something that was spoken about with my granddad. Like, oh, he's talking rubbish again, you know, like, and I had no idea that he was, you know, communicating with these people from America, and that people were coming over to research, you know, and look at the twins and speak to them and find out more information. And yeah, I had no idea to the levels that it had reached at all.
And because it was such a different time. So the thing that I wanted to do was to go back to this time in the 1950s and 60s where these are new ideas. People didn't know what reincarnation was. And John, you know, Lauren's granddad, knew about it and was kind of ahead of the game in this idea. So people, when he was talking to the press, and it was like headline news, and he was telling them his prophecies, that it would have been, for many people at the time, completely like new conceptually. And I think that creates a really interesting cultural moment, because it like only could have happened at that moment. There were these fresh ideas coming from the East into the West, and people were beginning to like change their minds about these sort of the old ways, the kind of more, structured religious belief systems. What I loved about it is like there's this huge moment of change happening, and this story is kind of at the forefront of that change. No matter what you believe now, or whatever when you click on this and listen to it, whatever your belief is, and I went in openly, and I'm open to hearing all the different beliefs about reincarnation. It's fascinating that this thing happened and then was forgotten. And so we're kind of bringing it back to life.
Even the form that it takes. I mean, I don't know whether it was ever discussed that it might be a TV series or documentary. I mean, I have to admit, I don't listen to that many podcasts. I'm a bit more of a film and TV junkie. But realizing just how powerful it can be, to really immerse somebody in a time and place just through the sound effects and this incredible storytelling from Will Sharp. So was this the form it was always going to take? And how did you bring him on board to be this incredible storyteller?
I felt like this story is so literary, there's such kind of richness in these characters, and these characters are dead, and we're building them through all the testimony and evidence that we have of what they were like, and trying to understand their motives. They do these extraordinary, like almost the most extraordinary things that I can think of, they do. And I really wanted someone to tell us this story who is like a really brilliant storyteller, and also like has a reputation for kind of operating the space where there's supernatural influences in their own work. And if you're not a fan of Will Sharp already, you definitely are going to be. I mean, he really got the program, and I think what we wanted to do was make sure that people really got to know those characters, and you need someone who can really understand those characters themselves and really tell you who they are, really build them. And that's what we were trying to do in the program. And then if you can care about the characters, you can care about all these events that happen to them over decades. And one of the reason that I felt so strongly that this wasn't just a kind of crank tabloid story about this man with crazy ideas shouting them from the rooftops, was that when I heard about John and what he was saying, and I was thinking, he's a crank. Then I thought, okay, so imagine my two children are run down in the road outside. I have to feel that grief. And there's an opportunity for me, because of my belief system or because an external person is telling me, to not feel that pain. There's an opportunity for me to believe that they're not dead. How do I know that I wouldn't take that opportunity? Because I've never been in that situation. And I'm massively sympathetic as a parent to like perhaps what the lengths you could go to not feel that pain. And I think that was the starting point for trying to really understand this story, which Lauren has helped us so much to do. So hopefully, it's the time of year where people are, it's a seasonal spooky story, and it's a time of year where people are looking a little bit more inwards, thinking about what happens after we die, all the different afterlife ideas, and like letting them in a bit into their lives. And, that's what we wanted to do with this, be introspective.
Yeah, I've always got that whenever I've ended up telling people this story. It's always been a case of that. I mean, I tell them the story and they're like astounded, first of all, but then they also then go in themselves and think, well, yeah, do I believe in it? Could I believe in it? Is this a possibility? And I think, now we're so much more open to those possibilities of reincarnation and, connection to other worlds and other people and, the natural world. I think there's just, people are really willing to explore, and I think that's what's great. And it's exciting that now this story can be told in a new generation of people that are maybe a bit more open-minded, but there's not to say that there's a right or a wrong way. I think it's all personal opinion, but it's definitely gets people talking, I think.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, kind of, what people can take away. I mean, like you say, Maybe there is something quite cozy, you know, it's sort of getting closer to Christmas, Halloween season, of being immersed in this incredible storytelling. But there are all these questions that maybe people don't think about often enough, you know, about reincarnation, life after death, but also maybe reconnecting with our past. Because I was thinking how many other people might have histories they've been completely disconnected from, you know, about their grandparents or even their parents. And without a team to help you go and research it, you know, how would you ever find out about it? So maybe people will want to go back and do that and discover who their parents and grandparents were.
I think it's really easy to kind of, you know, I don't know, you just take for granted, don't you, like your family history. And I think until one person makes that effort, you know, everyone's probably got an auntie who's on what's it called, Family Reconnected or something, you know, to kind of research their own family background. And I think it's so important because it tells a story and it tells you, you know, who you are. And I think maybe it'll spark that in other people. Yeah, I hope so anyway, because it's been amazing for me to kind of learn so much more about people that I never got to meet.
You know, and obviously there's a lot that happens in this show, and I don't want to give any spoilers away. The way I feel about it, from a personal perspective, is I try to be as open as possible, and hearing all these different ideas that come out in the show and the different ways that people feel and believe about death. I try to be as open-hearted as possible, but I'm also aware and cautious of people who are trying to convince me of something. And that is my takeaway. You know, you can be open, but you can still have a caution about people's motives. You know, if you're listening to our program, and you know, people will come away thinking probably vastly different things about what happened, and I think that's great. Yeah, that's my takeaway.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and I can't wait for everyone else to have the chance to listen to Extrasensory. Thanks a lot.